Jim Bob. That's what everybody calls me in the small town where I grew up. My family is rich, and we have been rich ever since my great-grandfather opened the first cotton gin in the area. A few years later, he would open the first bank in the county. Much later, my grandfather would open a Ford dealership. By the time I came along, our name was well known. We lived in a mansion on 120 acres near town and drove new cars every year. I was a little chunky, so I did not have a girlfriend in high school. But that changed in college. Girls seemed to like riding around in a new Mustang with a guy who always had a pocket full of money. There was one girl that I really liked. Her name was Sue Wilson. She was a cute, light brown-haired girl with pretty blue eyes. We started dating my senior year and were going steady by Christmas. We never had intimacy. She wanted to be a virgin on her wedding night. I respected that. Even when we drove to Panama City for spring break, there was no intimacy. Soon after I graduated, we flew to Vegas and got married. It was a surprise to everyone. Dad said he would have paid for a wedding here in town, but Sue and I did not want a big wedding. We loved each other and did not want all the drama associated with a big wedding. After a week in Hawaii, we came home and moved into the house with my parents. Life was good. 6 months after our first boy was born, tragedy struck. My parents were killed by a drunk driver. Since I was the only child, I inherited everything. The bank, the cotton gin, and the car dealership became my responsibility. I think I handled it pretty well. Besides my education, I spent lots of time working with my father learning the business. 2 years later, my second son was born. I loved my life and the family I had been blessed with. It was a year later that Sue asked me what I thought about her getting a boob job. I was all for it. The 2 babies had done a number on her once beautiful breasts, and they could use some help. We found a surgeon, and she went from having sagging 32C cup breasts to 36D cup breasts that stood proudly on her chest. But that operation changed more than just her bra size. I noticed her clothes changed. Her dresses now had plunging necklines. Her skirts were a little shorter. Her swimsuits went from one-piece to string bikinis. Her personality also changed. She spent less time with the kids. She became flirtier. Men took notice. Within a year, we had a nanny. Sue started having lunch with her girlfriends. Then it was drinks with them at the club until midnight. One night after Sue left for a night out with her friends, I checked the GPS I had installed on her Lincoln. It was parked at a motel over in the next county. She was cheating. I confronted her with what I knew the next morning. She did not even try to lie. She admitted the affair and then laughed at me. The way I see it, Jim Bob, is you have 2 choices. This is a no-fault state, and we did not sign a prenup. You divorce me, and you will pay me alimony and child support for the next 15 or 20 years. You'll see your boys every 2 weeks on the weekend while I live in this house. I can even move one of my lovers, and yes, there is more than one, in here to help me raise your sons. The other choice is just to put up with my flings. Who knows, in 5 or 10 years I'll get it out of my system. I think the second is the best for you. I'll still make love to you whenever you want. No problem there. And I promise to be discreet. What do you say? Well, to make a long story short, I agreed with the second choice. That was until today. I came home, and just as I was pulling up, I saw a car leaving. In it was a black man. I thought we had agreed that she could have her affairs, but always at a motel in another county. I even let her go on a vacation last year to New York. She was gone for 2 weeks. No problem. But now this, at our home, and, as I was to find out in a few minutes, in our bed. I entered the house fuming mad. Sue was changing the sheets on the bed. I exploded. What the hell, Sue? In our house and in our bed? Calm down. This was the first time here at the house. Leroy did not have a lot of time and I was in the mood. The kids are in school and I did not think you would find out. So what? You know I fool around. Get naked and I'll give you sloppy seconds if you want. Who the hell is this Leroy and how long has it been going on? I asked. He is just a guy I met at a bar about 4 months ago. What does it matter? Are you mad because he is black or because I brought him into our bed? I am mad because of everything. I want you to stop. I want our life back to where it was before you started this running around, I replied. Jim Bob, we have talked about this. I am not stopping. You can pack your things and move out. File for divorce if you want. But remember what I said would happen if you do. I was frozen in place. She was right. I would lose my sons and my ancestral home. She would be awarded a huge alimony and child support. I am destroyed. There is another option. I am sure I can talk Leroy into it. We'll let you watch. You can sit in that chair and watch us. You might enjoy that. I bet you would make a good cold, she said. I did not even answer her. I turned and walked out of the room thinking she was forgetting about another option. The one where I shoot the lying, cheating woman. I drove to the city cafe and ordered a cup of coffee with a piece of apple pie. Sheriff Bull walks in and sits down at my table. From the perspective of Bull, now is as good of time as any to introduce myself. My real name is Richard Stanton, but everyone calls me Bull. I got that nickname about the time I entered high school. I was big for my age. I was 6 foot 3 inches tall and weighed over 200 pounds by the time I was 14. Today I stand 6 foot 5 inches in my work boots and weigh in at around 245 pounds. The name Bull has stuck for my entire life. I knew Jim Bob in high school. He was a fat little rich kid that everybody picked on. I decided he might be useful later in life, so I befriended that little wimp. I started protecting him from the high school bullies. Soon nobody picked on him anymore. Like in the saying, rich kids go to college, poor kids go to war. Well, that's what happened to me. I did 3 years in the Army as an MP, then came home after a tour in Baghdad. I went to junior college and got a degree in law enforcement, then a job with the sheriff's department in the small county where we all grew up. I had always wanted to be a cop. I had an uncle who was a cop in a big city, and when he visited, he had lots of stories. Some of my father did not like his brother telling. You see, Uncle Tim was a corrupt cop. He bragged about shaking down drug dealers and rich people paying him for not writing tickets. Then there were stories of turning in less money on busts he made. Even though my dad did not agree, I think he envied his brother. This guy retired and moved to Florida with a pension and enough money to live the rest of his life. While my parents were married over 49 years, Uncle Tim never married. I wanted to be just like him. He was my hero. I was in my 4th year as a sheriff's deputy and moving up in the department when it happened. There was a bank robbery in town. The sheriff and the lieutenant were the first on the scene. A gunfight started as the robbers exited the bank, and the sheriff was killed before he even got a shot off. The lieutenant was badly wounded. He would never walk again. I got there just in time to see what was going on. The robbers were in the getaway car and starting to pull away. I slammed my patrol car into theirs. They were trapped with my car pinning them on one side and a telephone pole on the other. They were dazed as I got out and walked up to the front of their car. No, I did not read them their rights. I shot both through the windshield with my .357 service revolver. The official statement said they ignored my demand that they put their hands on the dashboard and were scrambling for their guns. I was hailed as a hero, and the county commissioners appointed me as acting sheriff until the next election, which I won easily. Now let's talk about Sue Smallwood and Leroy Jenkins, or LJ as he is known on the street. I knew Sue was cheating on Jim Bob. Everybody in town did. What I did not know was that she had taken up with Leroy. That is until the DEA agents came into my office with information about Leroy and his current lover, Sue Smallwood. The DEA wanted to turn Leroy and needed my help. That's the way it works in the drug business. Catch a little fish, then he helps you catch a bigger fish so he does not spend the rest of his life in jail. Since Leroy was operating in my county, and without paying me for protection, I gladly agreed to help. I secured a warrant and placed listening devices in Jim Bob's house by using one of my contacts with the cable company. While I could not see her and Leroy, it did not take a genius to know what was going on. I listened that afternoon as the two lovers made plans to combine a night on the town with one of his deliveries. But what was a lot more interesting was the conversation between Sue and Jim Bob after he came home. He needs my help. Sue had lied to him about this being the first time Leroy was at their house. I had recorded 3 other conversations between the two lovers, and who knows how many times he was there before I started listening. I had a plan in mind when I pulled out a chair and sat down with him at the city cafe. "I know what's going on with Sue and Leroy Jenkins." "How?" he asked. "Leroy's in trouble with the feds. I was brought in and Sue's name came up." "I'm going to kill that cheating woman," he replied. "Calm down, Jim Bob. I have a better way." For the next 15 minutes, I explain what I can do. My last sentence was, "But it is going to cost you." "How much?" he asked. "The way I figure it, she would get a minimum of $5,000 a month in alimony and about $2,500 a month in child support, which would last for at least 15 years. The alimony could go on forever. I'm thinking $100,000 in cash, and one of those new Ford 4-wheel drive pickups every couple of years would cover it." He shouted "Deal" and almost jumped across the table to shake my hand. I should have asked for $250,000. I'll have to remember that next time. "Go home and act like everything is fine. She is going to tell you that she is going to be gone this weekend. Actually, she is spending it with Leroy at his cabin at the lake. That's where I'll get them." Again, we shook hands and I left. I did wonder if he could pull it off. Probably. He has known of her cheating for years. One more night of pretending should be no problem. Back to the perspective of Jim Bob. Saturday morning, I was making breakfast for my sons when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, so I did not pick up. After breakfast, I was cleaning the kitchen when it rang again. I still did not pick up. It rang again with the same unknown number as I was about to start lunch. This time I answered. "Jim Bob, why did you not answer my earlier calls?" "Sue, I am sorry the caller's ID said unknown number, and I was busy with the boys. Why aren't you using your phone?" "Jim Bob, honey, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Sheriff Bull has me in jail." "What? Why?" I try to act surprised. "I'll explain it all when you get here. Please hurry. I've been here all night and I want to get home. I'll be there as soon as I can get somebody to look after the boys. Sit tight and don't talk to anyone until I get there." I cut the call and started laughing hysterically. The boys wanted to know what was so funny. "Mommy just told Daddy a joke," I replied. I waited until 3 p.m. to call the lady we used as a babysitter. She was there in 30 minutes and I drove to the jail. I met Bull in his office with the door shut for about 15 minutes, then was shown into a visitor's room. Sue was behind a glass and picked up the telephone as I sat down. "What took you so long?" she asked. "Mrs. Harrison was doing her weekly shopping. I had to wait until she finished," I replied. "Jim Bob, you have to get me out of here. I need a shower and I want to see the boys." Now she is worried about her sons? I have my doubts about that. "I talked to Bull before I came in here, Sue. You are in a lot of trouble. You were found in a house full of drugs. Your fingerprints are everywhere. Your drug tests came back positive. Bull says you were high as a kite when they found you and Leroy in bed. Then there is that gun they found in the glove box of your car, along with 6 bags of cocaine. Sue, what is going on?" This is all a big mistake. Leroy and I had driven to Memphis to go dancing. They were checking everybody before letting them in the club, so Leroy handed me his pistol, and I put it in the glove box. We were going to deliver the coke to one of his clients, but he was not at the club last night. I took them out of my purse and put them in the glove box. "So Leroy was driving your car, and you had the drugs in your purse?" I asked. "Yes. He likes to drive the Lincoln when we go out. In the club we danced and, okay, I admit I did a line of coke. First time, I swear. Then we drove back to Leroy's place up at the lake. I think I did another line. I can't remember. We were in bed making love when Bull and his men busted down the door and caught us. Jim Bob, it was horrible. I was naked and everyone saw me. They all watched as I dressed. After I was brought here, I was put in a cell with 2 other women. I told them what happened, and they said Bull had no right to bust in like he did. I know nothing about Leroy's drug business, and that gun is not mine. I think if you hire a good attorney, I will be released this afternoon and all charges dropped. Please? First of all, no matter what those jailhouse attorneys told you, Bull had every right to bust down that door. He had a no-knock warrant. They have found your fingerprints on an illegal gun. It was reported stolen a year ago. If there is a body on that gun, you will be charged as an accessory to murder. Not true, but I want to give her something to think about. Your fingerprints are all over that house, even on the packages of coke in your car. Of course, your drug tests came back positive. You are in big trouble, Sue. On top of everything, your case is going to be handled by Judge Parker. His daughter died of a drug overdose 3 years ago. He is very hard on drug dealers and their associates. You will be going before him Monday morning for a bail hearing. Until then, you might as well get comfortable. Jim Bob, we can get through this. Get me a good attorney. Then when I make bail, we'll work this out. Leroy will testify I had nothing to do with his drug business. When I get out, you and I can start over like you want. I'll quit running around, she started blabbering. Stop lying. First of all, Leroy has been under surveillance for over 3 months. The feds know he was at our house a number of times. They wired our house so all the conversations you have had with Leroy at our house are recorded. Now you are asking for my help? What a joke. 3 days ago you wanted me to be your humiliated husband. Last night you were found high on coke and with a black coke dealer. I will not be at your bail hearing and I will not be getting you an attorney. You are on your own from this minute forward. I hung up the phone and walked out of the room. Sue was pounding on the glass, but I never looked back. 2 days later, she was served with divorce papers as she sat in jail, unable to make the $250,000 bail. She never once called to talk to the boys or even asked about them to my knowledge. The district attorney offered her a deal: 3 years in state prison for women. She refused until she found out that Leroy was going to testify against his Mexican drug connection, and then he was going to do 3 years in a federal prison camp. Upon his release, he was going in the witness protection program. Sue decided she did not want him testifying at her trial. She was told by her public defender that if he lied under oath, his deal would be nullified. There was a lot more to the story of her and Leroy than she wanted to come out. Sue went before Judge Parker and ended up taking the deal. The surprise was the judge ordered her to have 2 years supervised probation after completing her sentence, and during that time she was to enroll in a drug rehabilitation program. Our divorce flew through the court system. Sue was present in the courtroom when this judge awarded me full custody of the boys. There would be no alimony, and Sue could apply for visitation privileges when she got out of prison. But the visits would have to be supervised. The judge noted that she had a drug problem and would be attending a drug rehabilitation program. Sue did not take this well and screamed that this was all my fault. She would see me in hell for letting this happen to her. What kind of sick logic is that? She gets caught high, in bed with a black drug dealer and with a gun and coke in her car, and it's my fault? The judge added a permanent restraining order preventing her from coming within 1,000 feet of me, my house, or one of my businesses. She was led away screaming. Switching back to the perspective of Bull, I had the arrest warrant 2 days before I served it on LJ. I wanted him and Sue to be caught together. The gun and her fingerprints on the bags of coke just added to her problems and made the divorce from Jim Bob easier. I love this truck. It has all the bells and whistles. I take it up to the lake and do a little fishing whenever I get the chance. Sometimes I even take one of my girlfriends up to the cabin that once belonged to Leroy. I bought it when the feds auctioned it off under the federal forfeiture policy. Life is good. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I sat at the table, intermittently looking at my watch and the notes of my prepared speech in front of me. By now it was purely habit. I knew the words I wanted to use by heart and had done for some weeks. I knew what I was about to do constituted a not inconsiderable risk, but I felt compelled to do it. I regretted that it had come to this, but the stubborn prick I called a husband had brought it on himself. What choice did I have? Was my husband going to enjoy what I planned? Shit, no. I knew he liked to always be in control, and I was about to strip every choice from him and bend him to my will. I leaned back in my chair as I awaited his return home. He could have no idea of the ambush I had prepared for him. I know what you're thinking. I was going to sit him down and announce I have a lover, then insist that he either goes along with it or I'd dump his ass and clean him out. Well, you'd be wrong. Nor was I going to announce I'm divorcing him or request a trial separation so I can mess around on him. Before you ask, no, I'd no desire to knock him out just so I could tie him up and humiliate him by being intimate with his best friend. And don't insult his integrity by suggesting I was there to announce that I've found out about his affair, so I was off for a revenge intimacy or two. My husband is the most loving, sweet, but above all, loyal man it has ever been my privilege to meet. No, this was the other type of ambush, a more literal one. I glanced over at my accomplice, Matt, 6'4" of muscle and tattoo, who stared back at me vacantly from where he was idling in the doorway of the bedroom just inside the front entrance. Well, I didn't pick him for his brain capacity, did I? I glanced at my watch again. Almost showtime. Right on cue, I heard Dave's keys in the lock of the front door. I nodded at Matt and watched him disappear into the shadows. I put on my best smile. Dave opened the door and, without looking inside, shut it behind him. It wasn't until he had turned again and taken 2 paces towards me that he looked up. His face immediately fell. Karen, what are you doing in my apartment? At that moment, the aforementioned 6'4" man mountain stepped behind my husband and clamped the wet cloth over Dave's mouth and nose. I watched sadly as Dave struggled, really alarmed at how long this was taking. In the movies, those chloroformed passed out immediately. In reality, my husband struggled and thrashed and his eyes rolled around, trying to see his attacker, but the huge biker knew his business. It must have been at least 2 distressing minutes before Dave changed tactics. He momentarily appeared to relax, then lifted his right foot and stomped down. I think his intention was to hit the top of Matt's foot, but he misjudged. Instead, his boot skidded down the biker's shin. I cringed at the reflected pain as even I, like EM big and stupid, winced. Quick as a flash, Matt's plan was abandoned. Releasing Dave with one arm, he spun him around and hammered a fist under my husband's chin. Dave saw it coming but was too groggy to protect himself. Finally, I saw his eyes slowly cross and he slumped in Matt's arm. Oh well, shame, but the effect was the same. In well-rehearsed coordination, Matt and I lifted my recumbent husband and carried him into the master bedroom. 5 minutes and 4 ropes later, the job was done. I thanked Matt and paid him the last $200 I owed him for completing the job. He pocketed it, then trundled out the door, patting his pocket to make sure he had his lockpicks. I sat on the side of the bed and gazed lovingly at my husband's face, while I stroked his brow. Why was he turning blue? It suddenly occurred to me that being unconscious and on his back had caused him to swallow his tongue. I tried to prise open his mouth, I dunno why, to try to grab his tongue, I suppose. It wouldn't open more than a little, so I put my hand under his neck and lifted a bit. I heard and felt air rushing into his lungs. I slowly relaxed as the color came back to his face. Now I just had to wait until he came out of his mat-induced swoon. It was still a good 10 minutes before his eyes started to flicker. I just sat there stroking his brow. Finally, his eyes opened fully. Within seconds, he lunged upwards but was pulled back by the ropes. His head thrashed from side to side, looking at his bonds. Finally, seeing he was helpless, he stopped thrashing and just started yelling, help, as loud as he could. I had anticipated this, so I slapped him as hard as I could to stun him a little, then reached for the pre-prepared gag. I had hoped we could talk like civilized human beings, but if you are going to be unreasonable, then a one-sided conversation will have to do. I stopped when I had finished tying the gag and looked once again at the face that I'd loved for 23 years. I took a deep breath and imagined my notes in my head. Now, darling, I started talking. Something was wrong again. He appeared to be unconscious. Come on. I didn't slap him that hard. His eyes were rolled back in his head and his body was kind of vibrating. Thinking my slap had triggered something, I just sat and stared at this bizarre behavior. In my panic, I thought I could undo whatever it was I'd done by slapping him again. I leaped up and straddled his chest and brought my hand back to administer my medicine. "I'm sorry, darling. This wasn't what was supposed to be." My body was suddenly propelled sideways as someone tackled me to the floor. I looked up and saw, to my surprise, another woman. She was a little taller than me and quite beautiful, with flaming red hair. She was a good deal younger and obviously fitter. Just like I was before my athletic body had been allowed to run down a little. I found myself pinned to the floor in some sort of wrestling or martial arts hold. The pressure around my throat allowed breathing just. I knew that a little more might change that, so I let my body go limp and just stared up into her startling green eyes. "Let me up. I have to talk to my husband." "I will let you up, but not to talk to my boyfriend. I want to see what's wrong with him. Try to interfere and believe me, I will break both your arms. I've called the police, so go or stay, I don't care. Do you understand?" The pressure remained until I nodded my assent. She jumped up and looked at Dave. His condition was still the same. She quickly put her head to his chest and listened. I saw the color drain from her pretty face, and then she jumped up, grabbed the phone, and called an ambulance. As soon as she hung up, she grabbed a knife and cut Dave's bonds while screaming at me to help drag him onto the floor. I was starting to panic. "What's going on?" "I don't know. His heart is beating, but it's all over the place. I can't do CPR on the bed." "What the hell did you do to him?" "A friend of mine knocked him out. But he had to. Dave just wouldn't go out from the chloroform." The tall redhead paused again while she listened to Dave's chest. "Why did you chloroform him? Is this your way of getting him back?" "Nice plan." "No, I know he will never have me back. Not after what I did to him. He's way too proud for that." Any more discussion was interrupted when 2 policemen rushed into the apartment. The Hellcat quickly outlined what had happened, and one of the policemen quietly arrested me. As I was led to the door, the worry, the terror, but most of all the frustration, just overwhelmed me. I just wanted to tell him why. He has to listen. He has to forgive me. I was taken to the police station and put in a holding cell for what seemed like hours. They'd offered to call a lawyer for me, but I knew I couldn't afford one. I'd spent just about all my savings on divorce lawyers until I'd accepted that Dave was gone forever. I was still terrified. What if Dave was dead? Then I could never explain why I'd done what I did and would never get his forgiveness. Finally, I was taken to an interview room. 2 detectives sat me down and turned on a tape machine. I saw no harm in agreeing to be taped while being interviewed, but that was as far as my cooperation was going to go. The first 3 questions I just answered. I refused to answer that on the grounds it will tend to incriminate me. The 2 detectives were discussing getting a legal aid lawyer for me when there was a knock at the door. A 3rd detective poked his head around the door. "The girlfriend is here and wants a word." With obvious bad grace, the 2 original detectives left, and the tall redhead entered the room and sat down opposite me. "I'm Wendy Dormer, by the way." "Is Dave okay?" I asked. "He'll live, no thanks to you. Your little chloroform trick gave him cardiac arrhythmia. The doctors say that he'll be fine until his heart rate lifts above normal. Then he will just pass out. They're going to let him rest for a while, then stop his heart and restart it. There's a 90% chance he'll be back to normal. Otherwise, it's a pacemaker for the rest of his life." Relieved, I took the opportunity to look at her. She was statuesque in a bimboish kind of way, with a body that I would have been happy to have at her age. One look in her eyes told me that although she was my superior in every physical aspect, I had the drop on her intellectually. I wondered why she was here. She answered that for me. "Look, Karen, this shit has to stop. When are you going to get it through your thick head that Dave doesn't care why you did the nasty on him? He just wants the divorce and to move on with his life." "But he has to listen to me," I replied. "No, he doesn't. You need to tell him. But there's no law that says he has to listen. From what he tells me, you and he had a normal life until he came home and found you screwing another man. He said that as far as he was concerned, you had opted out of the marriage and he wants nothing more to do with you. But he owes it to me to just listen to why I did what I did. I know he and I are finished, but he has to forgive me. After he moved out, I tried phoning him, but he never answered. The same went with the emails. They just disappeared into the ether and I never heard anything. I sent him a letter and he just returned it unopened. I even tried a registered letter, but he refused to accept it. God, it is so frustrating. I tried accosting him at his work, but he just put his finger in his ears and refused to listen, then called security. I tried explaining it to his mom, but she just called me a slut and hung up. I even tried getting my mom and dad to intervene, but they told me they didn't want anything to do with me anymore. That hurt. But not as much as when my own kids refused to talk to me. My last effort was to refuse to sign the divorce papers unless he sat down with me one-on-one. He just halted the process. It is so frustrating. If I could just tell him why I did it, then we could all move on and people would just start talking to me again. What people? She asked. Anyone, I replied. Yes, I can see it would be frustrating. Let me tell you, Dave was disappointed that the kids took the attitude they did. He tried to tell them they shouldn't judge you, that the crimes you committed were against him, not them. But they're adults now and can form their own opinions. They're good kids. They and my two get on really well. When did you see them? Did you go to Sydney? No, they were here last week. It's the second semester break. She let the news that my own children were in town but didn't come to see me sink in. Look, Karen, if it's going to save Dave's life and stop you doing this shit again, I'll be happy to listen to you now. I promised to try to get Dave to hear me out. I seriously considered her offer. I stared at her innocent, slightly vacuous expression. What the hell, I had nothing to lose and lots to gain. The police had only a circumstantial case, with only Dave as a direct witness. I knew I could rely on his good nature not to press charges against me. If this tried to make a statement, I would just deny it. Shit, in my business life I had two dumb pricks like her before breakfast every day. I decided to sound her out on one of the minor justifications I'd prepared. Okay, I was a virgin when we married and I'd always thought I may have been missing out on something. Yes, Dave thought it might be something like that. But he said that getting married a virgin had been at your insistence. He said he'd put gentle pressure on you to give it up. He even said he flagged it as a potential problem, way back then. I agreed with him that it would be grossly unfair for you to use that as a reason when it was your choice back then. Wendy's interruption caught me by surprise. She was being a little more forceful than I'd expected. That was nothing to the surprise of her next statement. And don't try to tell me you were just getting even for Dave playing away or neglecting you. The kids told me that growing up he'd always been attentive to you and spent all his free time with you and them. Don't try to tell me that he cheated on you first. I know him well enough to say that he is the most loyal, trustworthy, honorable, and respected man I have ever met. He would never dream of disrespecting you. Until you threw him away, that is. This woman was starting to piss me off with her naivety. I knew my voice was louder and shriller than I meant it to be, but I was beyond caring. Well, that was the problem, wasn't it? Respect. I've got a friggin' university degree. Dave never made it past high school. I clawed myself up the corporate ladder after taking off 10 years to look after the kids, and nobody said shit. Dave gets promoted to foreman, and it's like everyone thinks he's been elected president. I hang around with smart business professionals who drive BMWs and dress nice. He hangs around with sweaty, blue-collar yobs who drive Fords. He gets to eat what he likes and still looks hot, while I diet my off and still end up looking like a pudgy middle-aged housewife, even after the facelift and the boob job. Everyone likes Dave. Everyone respects Dave. Everyone wants to be with Dave. I hate it. I paused to try to lower my voice below the screech I knew it had become. Even when I got a promotion last year to group manager, all my own parents could say was that with all the money they'd spent on my education, they expected nothing less. But that didn't stop them from raving about Dave's bonus. I earned more in 3 weeks than Dave's bonus was for the entire year. It just wasn't fair. That year I spent a bloody fortune on a hairdo, makeup, and a dress for my company's Christmas party. I turn up and all anyone has to say is, "Where's Dave?" Do you have any idea what it's like to know you are socially, financially, and intellectually superior to your husband, yet your own parents seem to like him more than you? Do you? Wendy shook her head. Karen thought Wendy was the type of person she most hated. The sporty bimbo at school who had her pick of the boys. The vacuous type that hung around her husband at parties and laughed at his crude jokes, while she was trying, but failing, to impress people with her knowledge and intellect. The ones that agreed with him whenever there was a disputed point, even when her argument was superior. Not just the women, but all the guys as well. The ultimate humiliation was when, after one argument, Dave came to her defense against the mob. The argument had been about stay-at-home moms. Dave had jumped in and extolled her virtues as a mother who had selflessly sacrificed her early career to give the children what they needed. A loving, nurturing environment. His comments on how good she looked after the ravages of 2 children should have drawn them together but had the opposite effect. She, the group manager, has to be rescued by a foreman. Well, after a while, I really started to resent it. Every time I tried to prove I was better in just some small way, it backfired. Just made me look competitive and worse, made people rally around Dave. In the end, I decided there was only one way to get one over Dave. I would take a lover. If I could keep an affair secret from Dave, then it would prove I was better than he was. Just to me. If I could find someone who was a better lover than him, who would give me more pleasure, then I could secretly humiliate him and he would not be the wiser. Well, that wasn't much of a challenge, was it, Karen? Dave is so open and trusting that you could have screwed a guy in bed next to him and he wouldn't have noticed. How long did this go on for, she asked. 3 guys over 6 months, I replied. Wow, Dave thought it was just the one. Was it what you were hoping for? On the whole, no. Sure, it was satisfying getting one over Dave and successfully hiding it, but the intimacy was awful. Because I was so inexperienced when I married, I had no idea that Dave was bigger and better than most men. The guys didn't give a shit about my pleasure. It was just wham bang, thank you, Mom. I only went with the first 2 a couple of times. The third guy, who I worked with, was the only one even remotely up to Dave's standards. So why didn't you give it up? She asked. Because if I did, then Dave would have won again. I felt I had to keep going until I had better intimacy with someone than the intimacy I had with Dave. Then I could have retired knowing I'd had better intimacy than Dave had ever had, and I could have stopped, knowing something Dave never would. I was training the third guy, John, up with everything I liked best. I could see this logic just wasn't registering with Wendy. Serves you right, you should have been concentrating at school rather than intimating the entire football team. So what happened in the end, Karen? What you are telling me now doesn't sit with what Dave told me. He figured you wanted to be caught. That was why he came home at his normal time and caught you having intimacy on the couch. Of course, I didn't want to be caught. I knew that Dave would throw me out on my arse if he ever discovered me. I came to realize that John would never get me to where I wanted to be, so I came up with another plan. Dave had intimated with me a couple of times a few hours after I'd been with other guys. It was kind of hot, but still not what I wanted. I made the mistake of reading some stories about humiliation online. There was one about a woman who had her lover finish in her, then got her husband to eat her out a short time later. This story struck a real chord with me. I knew this was what I was looking for. If I could pull this off, my obsession would be over. No matter how inferior I felt from then on, I would remember Dave humiliating himself that day. So I took the Monday off and invited John to come over in the afternoon. The plan was for him to give me at least 2 good loads just before Dave came home. I set an alarm for 4:45, knowing that Dave always came home spot on 5:30. I was going to lie on the couch and invite him to dine when he walked in the door. Just my luck that for the first time in years, he came home early without ringing. I stopped, realizing that in my anger and frustration, I had departed wildly from my script. He didn't actually come home early, Karen. If you'd gone to work that day, then you would have realized that you and Dave had forgotten the start of daylight savings the day before. He turned up to work an hour late but left at normal time. He said he'd rung and left a message on your cell, she replied. Shit, I answered. I really don't know why you thought all that was necessary, Karen. I've talked to Dave a lot about this, helping him heal. At no time did he ever give me the impression he thought he was superior to you. In fact, he worshipped the ground you walked on. As for your parents, when I've spoken to them, they've always given me the impression that apart from this incident, they were very proud of you. Yes, I know that now. I realized that most of it was in my head, but it seemed so real at the time. That's what I wanted to tell Dave all along, but the stubborn prick just wouldn't listen. So you cooked up this little scheme to make him listen to you. How was it supposed to go? She asked. Well, I found out where Dave was living and hired a friend of a friend to help me tie him up so he would be forced to listen. I bought some chloroform on the internet and broke into Dave's apartment. When he came in, the guy was supposed to chloroform him and help me tie him up. It turned to shit though. The chloroform didn't knock him out and he started to lash out. My hired help had to knock him out with his fist. Then we tied him up, but just after he started coming around, he had that strange fit thing. I slapped him to get him to pay attention, and that was when you burst in. You will keep your promise, won't you, Wendy? You will tell Dave why I did it, won't you? Before I answer that, Karen, I just wanted to ask how you think your scheme turned out, she asked. Well, Dave won again, didn't he? I lost my job, all my friends and family deserted me, and even my own kids won't even tell me when they're in town. Meanwhile, Dave gets to be the victim. My reputation is in tatters, I'm damaged goods. If I ever want a date, I'll have to leave town. Dave gets women flocking to line up just on the off chance you and he split up. No chance of that, Karen. I know gold when I see it. Now back to your question. I have no intention of telling Dave your twisted logic for destroying his life. Frankly, I didn't understand a word of it, and I can only see it inflicting more pain on him. Maybe one day when he is stronger, I'll trickle-feed it to him. Who knows, she answered. As I was calling her a reneging, I noticed she was twirling the index finger of her right hand in a circular motion while pointing it at the ceiling. The meaning of this became apparent when the door opened and the original two detectives re-entered the interview room. One walked straight to the tape recorder on the table, hit stop, and retrieved both tapes. Well done, Sergeant Dormer. An unusual tactic, but a plain confession of breaking and entering, assault, conspiracy, and unlawful restraint. We'll have to see how Mr. Brown goes after the operation, to see what other charges we can come up with. Thanks, Rex. I know Dave will hate this, but the only way he will ever be able to relax after this is if this mad bitch is safely behind bars. She turned just before she got to the door. Karen, when you get out, please respect Dave's wish to never see you again. I was too bewildered to even answer. Shit, was I smarter than anyone? And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.